Most of us do not realize how much reality is manipulated at every moment. While our attention is on what is visible, news, distractions of daily life, a small group controls a silent code that can shape the universe according to their will. It is the same principle that moves billions of dollars in political campaigns and advertising. And it is the same law that turns entire masses into an obedient herd without anyone noticing. Our ideas, our emotions, and even the sensations we think are harmless are constantly being decoded and manipulated. The mind is the key that creates or destroys life, and they know this key better than we do. And if your mind is that key, why would they work so hard to keep you distracted? Because there is a reason why these laws remain hidden. If everyone knew how to apply them, the control that exists today over our reality would dissolve in a matter of hours. Every day, more people awaken to this truth. But every minute lost is a silent vote for the elite to maintain their dominance. So the question is, will you keep sending a signal that feeds their game, or will you finally take command of the reality you want to live in? Most believe they control their own lives by making rational decisions and planning based on circumstances. But this idea ignores an uncomfortable fact. There are invisible forces shaping every detail of your experience. And no, this is not superstition. These forces are real, measurable, and, most provocatively, are being used by others consciously while the majority remains blind to them. The point here is to understand how much the invisible governs the visible, and how your reality may be built from it. Many of us think we control our own lives. We spend years planning the future, making logical decisions, analyzing facts, and acting based on external circumstances. This is the comfortable narrative taught to us early on. It is the basis of common sense. You work hard, make the right choices, and the results appear. But this view, as safe as it seems, ignores an inconvenient fact. There are invisible, silent forces shaping every detail of your experience, and they don't respond to your agenda. They respond to your emission. This is not mysticism or superstition. These forces are real. They are measurable and operate by a law as strict as gravity. The foundation of everything that exists, from the tiniest particles to the most distant galaxies, is not solid matter, but what physics calls patterns of energy. These patterns are, at their core, frequencies, vibrations with concrete physical properties that behave in predictable ways. Your reality, which seems so solid and unchangeable, is actually a set of frequencies overlapping, interweaving, and interacting every second. Those who understand how these patterns work learn to alter the structure of their own lives, and those who ignore them become prisoners of a game whose rules they do not know. The most fundamental law of this game is constructive interference. In physics, this phenomenon is simple to understand. When two waves meet and their peaks align, the result is a wave with a much greater amplitude. This is the language of tides, of acoustics, and of light. Surprisingly, it is also the language of the mind. The brain, with its complex electrical activity, emits patterns that interact with the environment. Thought, emotion, and intention are not just abstract concepts. They are patterns of energy operating at specific frequencies. A thought of fear, for example, has a different frequency than a thought of gratitude. And when these elements align, when your thought, your emotion, and your intention vibrate in the same harmony, the result is not linear. It is exponential. The concept is like two identical tuning forks. If you strike one, the other begins to vibrate by resonance, without physical contact. That is exactly what happens with your mind. This is the basis of our power of creation. The problem is that most of us do not live intentionally. Many spend the entire day unconsciously tuned to the predominant frequencies of the environment. Conversations full of pessimism, news saturated with fear, and environments loaded with tension recalibrate our vibration without asking permission. That is why certain groups, especially in advertising, politics, and media, obsessively study how brainwaves and human emotions work. They know that controlling frequency is controlling perceived reality. But what does modern science say about this? If thoughts and emotions are frequencies, what happens when they meet? Physics offers a clear, and in some ways frightening, answer. A classic example is that of an opera singer who can break a crystal glass with the power of their voice. This is not magic. It is the principle of resonance. Every object, including the glass, has a natural frequency of vibration. When the singer emits a note that matches this frequency exactly, the energy amplifies so intensely that the structure of the glass cannot withstand it and shatters. The voice does not destroy the glass. It brings it to a point of destructive coherence. Now let's transpose this logic to our inner universe. Your thoughts, your emotions, and your intention are not separate elements. They are dimensions of the same vibrational process. Each has a unique frequency that can be measured in the body as electrical and magnetic patterns. Yet most of the time, these frequencies rarely operate in perfect alignment. It's like trying to play a harmonious chord on a completely out-of-tune instrument. The sound exists, but it is weak, distorted, and does not resonate powerfully in the space around it. When your mind projects a goal but your emotions carry a state incompatible with it, or when your intention, the silent, sustained focus, is scattered, you create internal interference. This conflict of frequencies cancels a significant part of your creative impulse. That is why we often feel exhausted and without progress, even when we are making huge efforts. We are generating noise, not a clear signal. And as a result, our own energy cancels itself out. The key is to understand that when these three dimensions, thought, emotion, and intention, come into harmony, the reinforcement that occurs is not superficial but exponential. It is the creation of inner coherence to such an extent that your mind, heart, and will vibrate as a single field. It is the difference between a scattered beam of light that barely illuminates the path and a focused laser capable of cutting metal. This coherence amplifies your ability to influence outcomes, not only through clearer actions but through the way your own energy field interacts with the environment. What we are talking about here is not a completely new idea. This understanding that reality is a malleable field and that inner harmony generates immense power was explored by ancient civilizations. Modern science only gives us the literal translation of a knowledge that existed centuries ago. And if physics today is validating these laws, what did the ancient traditions of humanity already know about the source of all life and creation? The idea that reality is a field of energy and that inner coherence is the key to shaping it is not a recent discovery. If we look beyond myths and metaphors, we find the same concept in ancient wisdom. In Hindu tradition, for example, the universe and everything in it are sustained by a fundamental force, a vital energy they call prana. This concept was not just a belief. It was the basis for practices like conscious breathing and yoga, which explicitly aimed to control and direct this energy. They understood that the quality of life experience depended directly on how this vital force was cultivated and circulated. It is vibrational engineering applied to the body and mind, using the breath itself as a tool for alignment. In the West, this same quest for inner mastery appeared differently. In alchemy. For centuries, alchemists were seen as madmen obsessed with turning lead into gold. However, the goal of alchemy was the great work, the transmutation of the soul itself. Lead represented the dense human nature, full of fears, ignorance, and low emotions. Gold symbolized a purified state of consciousness, enlightened and free. This journey was not just chemical, but spiritual, reflecting the understanding that external reality would be a reflection of internal transformation. This same vision also finds parallels in the teachings of Christianity. In Matthew 17:20, there is a direct reference to this principle. Unwavering belief, an internal state of total conviction, is a force so powerful it can reorganize reality around you. So Jesus said to them, "Because of your unbelief, for assuredly I say to you, if you have faith as a mustard seed, you will say to this mountain, 'Move from here to there,' and it will move, and nothing will be impossible for you." Matthew 17:20. Faith here is not just a feeling, but a state of mental and emotional coherence that manifests as a physical, transformative force. Despite their different cultural and historical origins, these traditions converge on a central point. They state unequivocally that your external reality is not separate from your internal state. This is an uncomfortable claim for a mindset that prefers to separate the observer from the observed. But contemporary physics confirms that the act of observation changes the system observed, and it goes further than that. This interference is not limited to the microscopic level of particles in a laboratory, but operates on the scale of our daily choices, relationships, and circumstances. At this point, the boundary between science and spirituality dissolves. What these ancient teachings showed us is that the universe is a field of polarities. There are patterns that expand, strengthen, and nourish, and others that contract, drain, and weaken. This is the simplest expression of something that manifests complexly in each of us every day. A thought of resentment, for example, carries a different frequency than a thought of gratitude. This distinction is not a matter of moral judgment, but a measurable effect on your body and environment. This is where the concept of destructive interference manifests within you. In physics, destructive interference occurs when two waves of the same frequency but opposite phases meet and cancel each other out. The same logic operates in the mental field. Dissonance occurs when your conscious intention, what you verbally say you want, is sabotaged by contrary emotions and beliefs. It's like trying to broadcast a radio signal at one frequency while simultaneously emitting an opposite signal. The end result is a distorted signal without clarity. This is the cause behind that frustrating feeling of going in circles, of making great effort and achieving minimal progress. In this case, your creative energy is not weak. It is simply being canceled out. On one hand, you may desire prosperity but spend the day immersed in financial worries. On the other, you may seek healthy relationships but keep cultivating resentment from past hurts. These frequency conflicts not only delay results but also reinforce the patterns you don't want. I know it's hard and even uncomfortable to hear this, but some things must be said for our own good. The good news is that quantum mechanics also teaches us something essential about change. The frequency of a system can be altered. The secret is not to try to fix the world out there, but to change your internal state. It is an act of personal vibrational engineering. You deliberately replace one thought pattern with another of opposite frequency. So replacing internal images of failure with vivid images of achievement is the first step to reorganize your reality. This view shifts the focus from the external world to the internal one. I'm not saying the external world is irrelevant, but it is largely a conditioned reflection of what happens inside your field. Your perception of a situation and the emotion you choose to have in response to it determines the frequency you emit. And this choice, almost always unconscious, is the true lever that defines your reality. Inner coherence stops being an abstraction when we examine how perception actually shapes the reality we experience. The sequence is always the same. An event happens, the mind interprets it, and from that interpretation comes the emotional and behavioral response. It is at this moment, almost always unconsciously, that the frequency is defined. Two people can go through exactly the same situation but come out with completely different internal states. The event was exactly the same, but the lens through which it was filtered was not. This dynamic is no accident. Quantum physics teaches us that the simple act of observing a system at the subatomic level changes its behavior. Therefore, your act of perception works like a radio tuner. Adjusting it is choosing which vibrational band you want to operate on. A negative reading of a situation, for example, triggers states of contraction, fear, and resentment, which not only limit your ability to act but also attract compatible patterns. On the other hand, a constructive reading, even in the face of a challenge, activates states of expansion, focus, courage, and creativity that fuel more effective actions and open new possibilities. This choice is not forced optimism but a deliberate frequency adjustment, like changing the station to capture a clearer signal. The big problem is that most of us allow this adjustment to be made by automatic patterns, settled by past experiences or environmental influence. News broadcasts with emotional bias, conversations full of complaints, and carefully calibrated visual and sound stimuli all act as frequency programming. But what if this programming is not just accidental? We cannot ignore the role of the attention industry in this dynamic. What seems to be only entertainment, advertising, or information is, in many cases, a mechanism of mass synchronization. Advertisers and media strategists do not just sell products. They exploit the emotional architecture of human beings to induce collective states. They know that colors, rhythms, framing, and the repetition of certain narratives are calibrated to provoke a response. So again, they do not just sell a product, they sell a feeling. A public kept in constant anxiety, for example, makes faster, less critical decisions and tends to seek relief in products or leaders that were previously prepared for this demand. The effect is not neutral. When a state is repeated consistently, the corresponding frequency becomes predominant in the collective, like a choir gradually drowning out any other melody. In this scenario, passivity is your greatest vulnerability. Those who consume stimuli without filtering adopt, without realizing it, states they did not consciously choose. And since each internal state is a frequency emission, this passive adoption means you are participating in a collective frequency that may be completely out of alignment with your personal goals. This is the practical use of a universal law by those who understand it. The real danger lies in your lack of vigilance. Allowing the environment to dictate your state of consciousness is to give up your role as co-creator. And when this happens, your most valuable energy becomes a resource that feeds someone else's game. But what happens when you decide to take back sovereignty over your own will? The counterpart to the vulnerability of passivity is the sovereignty of your own will. This is not a superficial positive thinking practice where you repeat empty phrases hoping something will change. It is a deliberate and sustained adjustment of your internal state, a conscious act of personal vibrational engineering. It consists of persistently assuming a desired state of consciousness and sustaining it even if the external reality does not yet reflect it. It is the difference between wishing for something in the future and deciding that, from now on, you already operate from the reality you seek, becoming what you aspire to be. This process is what allows you to access a higher state of consciousness. This practice, however, requires more than just good intention. Emotion is the fuel that fixes intention into reality and integrates it into the body. Without an emotional charge, The mental image is nothing more than a draft without strength. That is why ideas without feeling rarely turn into action, much less results. The word emotion, which comes from the Latin emover, literally means to move out or to put in motion. And it is this energetic movement that signals to the universe and to the body that your intention is relevant enough to be prioritized and manifested in the physical plane, serving as a vital link between your inner and outer world. From a physiological point of view, your biology makes no distinction between what you think and what you live. Each emotion changes the internal chemistry, and with it, the electromagnetic signature of all your cells, redefining your state of being. Prolonged states of gratitude, coherence, and enthusiasm, for example, generate patterns that favor cell regeneration, mental clarity, and resilience. In contrast, chronic states of frustration or anger create incoherent patterns, affecting everything from the immune system to decision-making ability. The human body, with its trillions of cells, is your first and most responsive field of manifestation, where each emotional choice is a silent vote that determines your health and your frequency. Living as if your desire is already fulfilled is not a game of make-believe or self-deception. It is a deliberate adjustment of your internal state to match the frequency of the result you want. When this condition is sustained, changes begin to manifest not by chance, but by resonance. People, circumstances, and opportunities compatible with the field you created are drawn to you because your internal state is no longer in conflict with what you say you want. The common mistake is waiting for external signs to feel authorized to change internally, which only keeps you tuned to the frequency of lack and prolongs the reality you desperately want to change. When you master this practice and sustain your frequency, you are not just changing your reality, you are actually moving into a higher dimension. It is a plane of existence where the rules of fear and scarcity no longer have the same power over you, and where what you emit manifests with a clarity and speed that once seemed impossible. True sovereignty is the ability to master this choice, to select what you feel and sustain it, regardless of what the world around you presents. Of course, it is not an easy task, but it is the only one that truly matters. And if a single individual with aligned will and coherent emotions can exert such significant influence on their immediate environment, what happens when this knowledge is brought to the level of collective intention? What would happen if millions of people, consciously and in coordination, began to vibrate at the same frequency of peace, abundance, and renewal? When coherence is not just a personal state but a shared phenomenon, its power does not add, it multiplies. The same law of physics that allows a single vocal note to shatter a crystal also operates on the human scale. Imagine a harmonized choir. Hundreds of voices sing in unison, but the effect they create is not just a louder sound. It is a field of resonance that can be felt physically. The sound waves, aligned and coherent, amplify exponentially, creating a vibration that fills the environment. The power of this choir does not lie in the individual volume of each singer, but in the precision of their tuning. The same principle applies to consciousness. Groups, even small ones when aligned in a clear and coherent intention, can generate fields of influence far more powerful than the sum of their parts. Human history is full of examples of this. Great social movements, scientific paradigm shifts, the fall of regimes, all were preceded by an almost imperceptible change in the mental and emotional climate of a population. A radical idea that was once isolated, when adopted and nurtured by a cohesive group, becomes an irresistible force. This is the great difference between a scattered crowd, moved by chance, and a focused group capable of influencing the world. The crowd generates noise and distortion, while the aligned group becomes a super emitter of a powerful frequency. And so, collective intention ceases to be an abstract concept and reveals itself as a practical force for shaping the trajectory of entire societies. What this law shows us is that the field of reality we are immersed in is a joint construction. It is shaped by everyone, every second. But ignoring this mechanism does not stop it from affecting you. Your participation in this process is inevitable. So the only real choice you have left is to decide which frequency you will feed. Inertia, the state of no effort and no purpose, does not exempt you from participating. On the contrary, it makes you a silent contributor to the dominant frequency of the environment. In this game, there is no neutrality. Every thought, every emotion, and every intention is a silent vote for the reality you want to see manifested. When you consume news that immerses you in fear and anxiety, you are voting for the perpetuation of those states. When you join a conversation full of complaints and bitterness, you are adding your energy to the frequency of dissatisfaction. So your contribution to the collective field is inevitable. You are emitting a signal every second, and that signal is resonating with the world around you. Passivity does not make you invisible. It only makes you a piece on someone else's chessboard, an energy resource for agendas that are not yours. The real choice, then, is not whether you will contribute, but what you will contribute. Your power lies in the awareness that, at every moment, you have the opportunity to vote for a different reality. Instead of automatically reacting to external circumstances, you can choose to respond from a state of inner coherence. And when you do that, your energy no longer cancels itself out. It joins with others, creating a field of influence that cannot be ignored. There is no neutral state. The absence of a conscious choice is, in itself, already a choice. And the silent vote of a single person, when multiplied by billions, creates the world in which we all live. The question, then, is no longer, what can I do? But rather, where am I directing my energy? So again, what science, ancient wisdom, and your own experience show is that reality is not a fixed place where things simply happen to you. It is a dynamic, malleable field that responds to the frequency you emit. Passivity is the only state that keeps circumstances in a cycle of repetition. And the only way to break this cycle is to transcend the role of passive observer and become a conscious co-creator of your reality. To do this requires more than just understanding the theory. It is necessary to practice until inner coherence becomes your default state. You must recalibrate your internal system so that it operates on a new frequency. You can start with the practice of inner coherence right now. It is a simple, direct tool designed to help you align your thought, emotion, and intention to sustain the frequency of your goal. Start by setting aside even just 5 minutes. Sit in a quiet place and close your eyes. Focus on your breathing for a few moments, just to calm the mind. Then, clearly visualize yourself experiencing what you truly desire. Don't just think about it, feel it. Connect with the emotion of having that desire already fulfilled, the sense of gratitude, of joy, of relief. Remain in that state knowing that this simple act of alignment is your chance to finally take full control. And if you feel trapped in a cycle of repetition, of seeing the world as an unchangeable place and feeling at the mercy of circumstances, know that this does not have to be your reality. This journey we have traveled is not about what is out there, but about what is within you. It is about reclaiming a power you have always had, but were conditioned to ignore. Your transformation is not about becoming someone else, but about revealing the authentic frequency of your being, which has been muffled by external noise. Your reality, until now, may have been a faithful reflection of the frequency you unconsciously sustained. But what happens from today on is your choice. You can choose to stop being a passive consumer of energies and become an active creator of your own experience. So I invite you to take the first step. And from that first movement, life will begin to respond. Trust and have faith. Thank you for embarking on this journey with me. If this video resonated with you, I invite you to like and subscribe to our channel. Share this video with others so they can benefit from this message. And don't forget to leave a comment below sharing your thoughts, reflections, and experiences. Thanks again for watching and for joining me. Take care and see you soon.